The original Pikmin helped kick off the GameCube in a major way. Wanting to spice things up, not only did Nintendo launch their N64 successor with a Luigi game instead of a Mario game, but soon after an entirely new IP, featuring a little tiny captain commanding hundreds of plant-like creatures to explore every nook and cranny of an unknown planet in order to repair your ship and get home. And it was great. And despite Pikmin 1 releasing the same day as Super Smash Bros. Melee, the game still managed to sell well over 1 million units. So yeah, it was successful. Naturally, a sequel was on the horizon, releasing just a few years later. The original game didn't have much of a marketing push back then either. It sort of just released and that was about it. Things were about to change with Pikmin 2 because Nintendo decided to go in a, different direction for the sequel?
I said with mustard.
Make it 2.
Okay, I'll buy the game, I guess. Nothing really all that interesting regarding this game's development. The only thing that was kinda neat is knowing that the Wii version took forever to come out in America, Japan, and Europe had it for years, while we had to sit and wait. That was fun. It really couldn't be simpler here. The first game did well, so they made a second one. It's not really any more complicated than that, but when it comes to Pikmin 2, do they do something totally different, or do they do more of the same? Yes. Both. Welcome back to Olimarch, everybody. I'm totally sticking with that name while I can. And now, Pikmin 2. Dude, the title screen is really cool here. It was pretty in the first one for sure, but now stuff actually happens with this one. That's pretty awesome. After the events of Pikmin 1, it turns out we were on Earth that whole time, by the way, Captain Olimar returns to his home planet of Hokotate, and his place of work, Hokotate Freight, has fallen on some hard times financially. Something about Olimar's co-worker, Louie, running into an issue with the monster on his mission or something like that, but regardless, the president of the company had to take out a massive loan as well as sell off a bunch of their assets. Yeah, basically everything. Luckily though, a bottle cap that Olimar brought home with him is actually worth quite a lot on his home planet. So of course, Olimar with young boy Louie in tow head right back to Earth to collect some treasure and pay off the company debt. He literally just came back from a life-threatening journey, not given a second of time to relax, see his wife and kids. Nah, that's the true tragedy right here. As Olimar returns to orbit for Earth, he then hits a tree on his descent. I'm starting to believe that he's just a bad driver. This separates the two captains, and from there, the adventure begins. So yeah, the goal this time is to gather a bunch of treasure, and the process of doing that is kinda, more or less, the same as before. Technically, what's really cool is a lot of the treasures are just like straight up real world brands. That's very weird. No matter how much time has passed, it'll never get old seeing the Pikmin dig up like a 7-Up bottle cap, the lid for a jar of Vlasic pickles, and like a straight up tube of chapstick. Now listen here, Nintendo, you're talking to a YouTuber here. I know a thing or two about shameless sponsorship spots. You're not gonna pull the wool over my eyes, you definitely got paid for this. Now if you excuse me. I bought a jar of pickles for this video. I always thought this was pretty cool, not just because, haha, it's funny, you get to see real objects in a Nintendo game, but it also really helps emphasize just how small Olimar is. The idea here is that Olimar is not even an inch tall, he is a very, very small boy, something that you can definitely gather from Pikmin 1 due to the leaf sizes and all that. But I think now that we have some perspective with objects that we can relate to in real life, it helps emphasize that a whole lot more. I like it. A big difference this time around comes in the form of course, having two playable captains at all times that you can swap between whenever you want to. This allows for a much finer level of multitasking, where each captain can be doing completely different things on opposite sides of the map. That's great. It's certainly a whole lot better than like leaving Pikmin alone to do something and then you just hope You have your fingers crossed that they just won't die. I got trust issues after playing Pikmin 1, alright? This is a great change of pace. When playing on the different stages, it is arguably a lot better than the first game. There's no day limit like before, though there is still a time limit on a day-by-day basis, and it is still super satisfying maximizing your time, learning the best way to navigate the new obstacles that stand in your way. The Pikmin also just do a better job of following you. You know, back in Pikmin 1, man, they would just trip, and you have to stand there and wait for them to gather themselves. Oh, that sucked. It's so much better now. I believe some of them do still trip from time to time, but it is nowhere near as bad. Thank goodness. Each day, once again, is also capped off by securing all of your Pikmin and leaving before the monsters come out to get some dinner. We get a report of all of our progress, we get to see how we did good and how we did badly, and now we get some email sent to us. Sometimes from Olimarch's family, getting a better glance at what they look like in motion, Louie's grandmother, that's just kind of adorable, and the president's wife. A face that only the victim of loan sharks can love. Man, she's like really mean too. Olimar got a good one, I'll give him that. Look how cute she is. I am so lonely, I want a friend that'll listen to my trouble. Oh my god, even Olimar gets those local singles in his area. Good for him. And speaking of new ways to maximize your time, now there are these new plants that give out berries, and by collecting enough of them, you have access to special sprays. The Ultra Spicy Spray enhances your group's strength and speed for a little bit, and the Ultra Bitter Spray allows you to freeze an enemy in stone for about 10 seconds or so, making strong foes super easy to kill. They also make burp and fart sound effects, so that's nice. Very good game, Mr. Miyamoto. Thank you so much. Glover, eat your heart out. Each area that you explore is also a bit of a remix of the levels from the first game. It doesn't really take much to see that you're basically exploring these same stages all over again, except this time there is a season attached to each one. Originality here would have definitely been nice, and there are plenty of differences to still make these levels stand out, but at least things here are much more visually interesting than before. However, though, the game is really not about the core levels. It's all about the caves. The caves. Two simple words that tore the complete fabric of the Pikmin fanbase in two. On one side, you got fans who are totally in contentment with this. They're just fine with it. It's whatever. The other side, though, oh, the simple act of being in a cave they hate now. It makes them wish for the sweet release of death. There really isn't much in between. I don't know why I'm talking about this in such an ominous tone. Spread throughout each level are holes that lead to caves, multi-floored stages where you can basically do the same Pikmin stuff that you've already been doing, but without the larger scope that the normal levels themselves provide. As well as no time limit, because as we all know, time doesn't progress underground. And now I do want to make this clear right off the bat that I do actually really like these. Each floor here is randomly generated, though the types of enemies and treasure that you find on each floor remain constant, meaning that each time you land in one, it is still up to you to figure out the best way to utilize your group of Pikmin to retrieve that floor's treasure and get to the end successfully. And on repeat playthroughs, you do have kind of a vague idea of what you're about to dive into. You also get rewarded at the end of these with some treasures that often give you power-ups. That is really awesome. One of the powers you get is the ability to pull Pikmin out of the ground with a whistle. Oh, it's about time they finally put that back in. Now, one of the biggest things to consider here is that you can't spawn any new Pikmin when you're inside the cave. So you really have to take the hazard warnings into account before diving in, and then you make the best with what you got. And joining you on your merry treasure-filled quest are the returning red, yellow, and blue Pikmin, acting basically the same as how they did before, although, instead of the yellows being able to use bomb rocks, which, again, that was weird in the first place, now they can handle electricity. That's a whole new can of worms right there I'll get to. This adventure then introduces us to 3 brand new Pikmin. Purple Pikmin, really thick boys that are super powerful. They cause shockwaves when they land on enemies, and they have the strength of 10 Pikmin when carrying items. But they're super slow, so sometimes using them can still be kind of annoying. The white Pikmin are super fast, great for carrying items and getting them back to your ship in no time. They can dig up items that are underground, that's cool. And they're also poisonous, causing damage to enemies that consume them. Lastly, there is the often forgotten Bulbmin. What am I looking at? They just pop up in caves from time to time, and then to get them, you have to kill the weird Pikmin Bulborb parent first. and then they suddenly see you and they're just cool with hanging around with you now. Okay. They don't really do anything special, they're just there for extra support, but they are just the cutest abominations I ever did see. And transforming existing Pikmin into purple and white within caves is the only way to gain access to them. You can't grow any of them from the outside world. You can bring them back successfully, that's no problem. Sadly, the Bulbmin can't though. Why are they here? Okay, so at its core, the caves go against almost every single design philosophy that the original Pikmin set out to achieve in the first place. Rather than having these levels that feel like living, breathing environments, the caves just feel lifeless, and they have this nonsensical level design that's surrounded by pure darkness, rarely changing up the aesthetics, and when it does, it's just, what? An above ground, underground cave? Okay, that makes sense. It's nearly impossible to tell one cave apart from the other, and when you can, it's often for the wrong reasons. Like, I very much remember this one room where they toss one of each big bulb orb at you. That's not memorable because it's good, that's memorable because I hate it. Sometimes enemies or straight up bombs fall out of the sky randomly, punishing you for trying to go ahead and multitask. Corridors are often too tight, making splitting up your group and trying to pull out specific Pikmin a pain. Some enemies here were clearly just designed to be annoying instead of challenging. Every elemental hazard that you run into just causes the Pikmin to scatter, very easy, you whistle them and you're good. Except for the newly introduced electricity, which is constant insta-death. That's cool. The water wraith is by far one of the scariest things to grace video games in general, and the list just goes on. At least there are bread bugs now. That's kind of funny, it's literally a loaf of bread with a face. I like them. The music in the caves is really bizarre too. The outside areas all continue to sound like this really great atmosphere, but then you go into the caves and it's like, I mean, I don't hate it, but what? Everything all wrapped up together here often results in a frustrating experience where you need to utilize a skill set that is totally separate than that of trying to best yourself in the outside areas. Which is what Pikmin was about in the first place. At least if you do lose a Pikmin in the caves, and I'm gonna guarantee you here, you will lose a Pikmin in one of the caves, you can just restart at the floor that you were on, so that's fine. But since all of the caves are once again randomly generated, you just gotta hope that you don't get screwed on the next attempt. Now, to reiterate, I do enjoy playing these, but it's impossible to ignore all of these flaws. I only really enjoy these because, again, the act of playing Pikmin is a lot of fun. Doesn't matter what you're doing, taking your army and going out into battle, it's incredibly satisfying. And with 14 of these caves of varying lengths and difficulties, it makes for a much longer game too. You could almost say too long, it's over 10 plus hours now. On the one side, that's cool, a lot more Pikmin gameplay. On the other side, you could argue it overstays its welcome. I mean, hell, the game even has 2 endings based on progression. Not like Pikmin 1 where there are 3 endings, 2 of which are just based on how good you do. On your path to 100%, you will see the game end twice. Once you completely pay off your debt, which doesn't really take a whole lot of time, Olimarch returns home, but forgets Louie. Because again, he clearly doesn't know what he's doing when he's behind the wheel. And of course, you're not gonna have Louie's blood on your hands today. You just return back to the planet, this time with the company president instead, and then you just keep doing what you were doing. Although you do get a really entertaining credit sequence with Louie trying to survive. I'll give the game that. That's pretty funny. I don't enjoy this whole big eye thing though. They just stare into my soul and quite frankly, it makes me uncomfortable. I understand the concept, I really do. It's neat that there is more gameplay after you complete the main goal. Like the 4th level is only unlocked after finishing your debt. But I feel like this could have been structured in a better way that doesn't just feel like padding. Is the selling point here now I can play as the company president? Woohoo! And I know I'm also now just complaining a whole lot, but realistically everything I talked about does end up feeling like a bunch of nitpicks. The game is still really fun to play and has some great highlights. Like for example, when you have a full group of Pikmin, they start to sing Eino Uta, which is arguably the series theme song. That nullifies every complaint I've had thus far. And the boss battles, once again, are pretty neat as well. At the very bottom of most of the caves, there is a battle against a new or returning unique monster. A good chunk of them are just evolved forms of existing enemies, so again, more originality would have been nice, but they're still cool. It does go against what I liked about Pikmin 1 not having dedicated boss levels, because that's clearly what we have here, but I still enjoyed them. They're a good test of your skills. I always really loved when you defeated the Empress Bulblax and then it just sits there like, oh man, I shouldn't have eaten all those chicken nuggets. Just another one of those beady long legs, no big deal here. Oh, never mind, it has a gun. How can this game be rated E when there's a spider with a gun? What is this, Spider on PS1? This is a spider holding a knife and a gun. Technology's gone too far. Oh, this boy just thick. The Emperor Bulblax actually shows up as a boss too. You know, the final boss from the first game. And he's stupid easy now. What a downgrade. Later on in the game, it even shows up as a regular enemy. Boy, how the mighty have fallen. Now, you can do the caves in any order that you want when you come across them, which is nice, but there is still a final boss. Down at the bottom of the Dream Den, we find Louie, held captive by this giant monstrosity, the Titan Dweevil. It's just this gigantic robotic spider that's able to spawn hazards of every element type, including electricity. The one-hit kill wonder, that's cool. It's a really neat fight in concept that he's able to do everything that would cause any Pikmin harm, but the lack of balance between the hazards makes the battle super easy when you have just a group of yellows. Why go in with anything else? They're the only ones who can survive the insta-death. After taking him apart piece by piece, the Titan Dweevil is destroyed and Louie is saved. Only worth 10 Pokos too. I love it. And even then, technically the game still isn't over. It's only over when you get 100% of the treasure. One of which, and I always save this one for last, is this stupid dumbbell that requires 100 purple Pikmin. Need I remind you, the Pikmin that you can't get unless you go underground. Oh, and look at them go! Grease lightning! The game is just fighting me back at this point. We're treated to a much more cinematic ending than the last game as the Pikmin suddenly have the ability to glow. Alright, that's cool. Olimarch and crew make it back home peacefully. We get to go over our victories and our blunders. And then by diving into the menu, we have a secret cutscene showing that while Louie did claim to be ambushed by a giant monster, you know, the incident that caused the company debt in the first place, it was actually Louie's fault the whole time. The Year of Louie is cancelled. Pikmin 2 added a bunch of extra content as well. Now there is a full-on Piccolopedia. You know how at the end of the first game there's that video that shows off every enemy in the game to really cool music? Well, now there is a glossary for every single enemy and item in the game with a description for each, from both captains. Olimarch has these lengthy and detailed synopses. Meanwhile, Louie talks about how he'd cook them. Oh my god. Okay. The Year of Louie is back on. Make a pâté de foie gras from this massively obese creature's liver and spread it over a sesame cracker. Oh, that's gross. The challenge mode has made a glorious return as well, but it has been completely redone. Now it's entirely based on navigating the caves, giving you preset armies of Pikmin and a short time limit to get as much treasure as you possibly can, on top of retrieving the key and progressing onward. And fun fact, that key was actually a removed element from the first game. Pretty cool we get to see that idea realized. I actually enjoy these more than the caves from the core game. The extra restrictions with the time limit and the preset Pikmin add a level of strategy to these that is definitely missing in the normal caves. And you can play them with a friend, splitting up the responsibilities between two people. That's really cool. And on top of that, something way better than the co-op in the challenge mode, there is a brand new 2-player battle mode as well. It's you and your friend in a race to either gather 4 yellow marbles or steal your opponent's marble. Throughout each of the maps are enemies to take down, or you can leave them for your friend to handle, as well as a bunch of cherries that when taken back to your ship will spin a roulette wheel to give you a random perk that could very well turn the tide of battle. This is an absolute blast. Now you can't take this mode too seriously, this isn't a pure competition of strategy, but when played with the right people, this has a Mario Kart-like quality of insanity going on. Oh, and I love it. Also, like if one player does really good over the other, their character just gets progressively more and more pissed off while yours gets more and more smug. This is amazing. And finally, the game did actually have e-reader support in Japan. Remember this thing? Probably not. This is actually true. Nintendo released Pikmin-themed e-reader cards for this thing, which unlocked a couple of minigames. Nothing too major, but it's just a pretty neat piece of Nintendo trivia. Maybe I'll talk about this thing one day. Don't hold your breath. Now, say what you will about Pikmin 2 and its transition into the more cave-style gameplay, one thing you can't argue here is that it's a much more well-rounded game overall. The adventure is much longer, there is a new level of charm with the branded treasure items as well as the Piclopedia and emails, extra reasons to pop the game back in for a few hours with some buddies. It's really great stuff. It still has plenty of what made the original Pikmin so much fun, but whether or not you enjoy the caves, it's not hard to argue that they take up just a bit too much of the game. Ultimately, I would easily replay Pikmin 1's main game over 2 any day. I appreciate them trying something new, but I think their priorities were just a bit misplaced. And for a while, that was it. That was all the Pikmin that anybody could play. Those first 2 games lasted everybody years. It took so long before Pikmin 3 finally entered our hands. It took far too long. At the very least, the first 2 games are super replayable, so it wasn't too hard to pop the game back in and go for a few hours. It was fine. Yes, hello, person who thought the water wraith was a good idea. It wasn't.